Hey everyone. When I told Felipe what talk I was gonna give, I just knew like what generally I wanted to talk about, but the actual talk and everything, I like did it in the last like 3 days, talking to everyone. That's how I kind of like figure out what to talk about. I didn't have anything before this, so it's probably gonna be very different from what the title says. The main thing I want to talk about right now is kind of like DAO coordination in general and issues with it. And specifically for Metafactory, we've kind of learned a lot through trial and error and, seeing how we can reward people and compensate people and all the different game theory and people's motivations and how we can like balance things so that the best outcome is what's like the game theoretic way that people behave. Like even for Metafactory, people kind of see it as like a merch shop, but in reality, we're kind of like a DAO R&D research collective disguised as a merch shop, because we're using these sort of tools and mechanisms to apply them for a problem that's like coordinating fashion production and merch design and all that stuff. And I'll talk about like what value even means and how we can have like large scale structured coordination without having to resort to like top down decision making, and then also how we can make capital allocation be more synchronized with value creation instead of disjointed. And one thing that was pretty cool from even the talks at ETHCC is like it seems that everyone's mind's in the same direction. If you look at Vitalik's talk or Kevin's talk, they're all talking about the need to move beyond DeFi, which is basically playing around with monetary value, but being able to capture and represent different forms of value. For example, all of crypto just uses like Web2 social media platforms right now to coordinate. Like Twitter and Discord and all these things, those are our main coordination tools. But those tools were created for a Web2 paradigm. And even when we start to think about how do we bring these tools into Web3, usually the first way you think about doing that is like put Twitter exactly how it works, but like store it in a decentralized storage and with like user accounts and stuff like that. But I think the most interesting things for the future of Ethereum is not like replicating Web 2 paradigms in Web 3 ways, but thinking what new paradigms are enabled with these new tools that we have that weren't possible before. Just like Twitter, it wasn't trying to like replicate sending letters over, continents or sending emails. It was using the advantage of this new social paradigm to create an experience that wasn't possible before. So we have tools like that for that in Web3, like decentralized identity, reputation, Sybil resistance. Like there's so many projects and teams working on these little building blocks that if you start to combine them and leverage them and, share our information in DAOs, how we're using these things and what works and what doesn't work, then we can start to build like a collective tool set of things that work and things that don't work. So with Metafactory, we always get asked from like the people that we work with, how do you like do your DAO tokenomics and like structure how you distribute value? I think pretty much all tokenomics for DAOs can be summed up into like these steps, which is like determine what you want people to do, and then give them tokens for doing it. It's honestly as simple as that. The harder part is like deciding what you want to do, and then when it happens, how to actually determine who did it and how well they did it. That's where the nuance comes in. But overall, this is the framework. This is the cheat code for DAO tokenomics. So I think another thing about DAOs is we kind of have this like utopian vision of like a big monolithic flat organization. I don't think that's actually how it's going to work. I think structure is important, and human brains throughout like history have been like trained on structure and work best under structure instead of chaos. So I think a good example of this is actually like people walking around in Paris. Like we have an Airbnb with 5 of us, and sometimes we're walking around deciding where to go. And some guys are like, "Oh, I'm kind of hungry. We should eat." And the other guys are like, "I'm not that hungry. Maybe we should do this." And everyone's like, "Where should we go? What should we do?" But that friction is because we're trying to act as like a monolithic group moving in one direction together. But the easiest thing to do is just like whoever wants to go eat. Whoever wants to go party. Like it's simple as that. The issue is when we fractalize and break up like that, we lose the sort of shelling points in which we can like know that we're all going in the same direction overall, and we all value the same things, and we have value flows to each other. And I think this like fractalization is what will allow an emergent sort of, if we had this the DAO, like the DAO that got hacked, like that was like this. Sorry, Griff. That was like this big monolithic thing, right? Kind of flat. But I think the issue with that was we thought of it as a top-down thing, right? Like we needed one big DAO to decide everything. But if you look at the ecosystem right now, the DAO is almost all of us, like what we're doing collectively, right? It's not a defined thing, but it's emergent from all of our individual actions as kind of people on the edges. So the cool thing about that is like we can take inspiration from nature, where we just set some like simple ground rules and then allow the nuance and complexity of coordination to emerge from that. And instead of trying to agree on outcomes and, what should we spend on what thing, we agree on purpose and a process. And then from that, there's a lot of arising complexity and nuance that we can capture. And it's kind of like you have an individual, then you have a family, and then family is a part of a community is a part of a city, and then cities are part of a like nation, right? So in the same way, we can start to structure our DAO coordination like this, where we can split off into smaller groups, but there's still components and nested within each other, with the tooling to have value flows between them. And yeah, that's the most important part, is like, if we're going to split up and be in these different circles where we're all working on our own stuff, we need really good tooling to be able to coordinate value flows and recognize value that's being created in a low friction, low coordination cost way, but also that's like has credible neutrality, and you're not just like assigning one person to decide and they have their own personal biases. So if you think about value, like how do we distribute value to each other? People usually just think about money, but money is actually a medium to convert one form of value into another. The actual value is like everything besides money, but we needed money to make that translation for us, or to make it easy to swap between these things. But if you think about, if there was a Uniswap for value, where you can just swap like certain forms of value for others without needing to like go through money, or the money's routed in like a way that's hidden from you, then it can be pretty powerful. So, money at the end of the day does run the world. It decides what people do, where people go. Most people's like motivations and decisions in politics are motivated by money. But the issue is that value creation is really disjointed from capital allocation, where the things that people value the most and everyone agrees are really valuable aren't the things that get the most monetary value allocated to them. Instead, the monetary value goes to people that sit at the intersection of transactions. So because they just happen to be at that intersection, like for example, investment bankers versus teachers. And teachers probably provide way more value for society than investment bankers, but an investment banker happens to sit at the intersection of transactions of monetary value, and so they are able to like extract as much out of that. So even if you think about like a salaried job, right? Even if you get paid like 150 grand, you're going to basically work just as hard as you need to work to satisfy your boss's expectations for that job, and not try to go any above that, right? But if we had a sensor for how much value people were actually creating, then people would be inclined to create as much value as possible and not limit themselves and push themselves to be doing the best things that they can for everyone else. Because they'll know they'll get compensated according to that sensor. So the most important thing is the quantifiability, right? We can't optimize for non-monetary things if we can't measure those things. And money has been used as like the optimizing factor because it's objective, right? It has an objective agreed upon value, and we can quantify it. But value is subjectively quantifiable, but not objectively quantifiable. I can like say how much I value like these different things, or these different people, or these different things that happened or people have done. I can say that, but everyone else is going to have a different perspective on it. So we can't objectively agree. However, just like the DAO kind of emerged as a result of us individually, doing stuff in the ecosystem rather than something that we like collectively agreed on. In the same way, we can have value be objectively quantifiable without needing money. And what that means is it's actually intersubjective. The objective thing is the thing that emerges out of a blend of everyone's individual subjective opinions. And instead of needing to coordinate on a top level, all we have to do is think about what's immediately valuable to us and quantify it and have it exist in a shared open state where everyone else can see it. And then if it's in that shared open state, everyone else can see it, everyone else can attribute value to it, and we can run algorithms on it. Because humans, like, we're really good at the nuance and our individual perspective, but we're really bad at seeing the bigger picture. You know, if I were to describe, Griff to someone else, and then, Griff's best friend was to describe Griff to someone else, it would sound like two completely different people, even though it's the same person. So the only way you actually get a good picture of Griff is by asking everyone and blending all those things into, and then that's what Griff is, without individuals having to agree on what Griff is or who Griff is. Sorry, Griff, you're just right in front of me. I have to. This is the cool thing, is a lot of communities in the DAO ecosystem are already quantifying these non-monetary forms of value. People using source cred, people using coordinate, token engineering community uses praise. Like, these are all like data points that are siloed within these DAOs. But if you can lift these data points up, attach them to decentralized identities, and make them global, we can start to attribute value to these and map out value flows between DAOs and between organizations. And because it can be between DAOs, any DAO you're a part of can then now fractalize into smaller sub-DAOs of maybe 5 groups each, or 5 people each. And because you have these interconnections, we're actually one big DAO that's broken up into smaller components and down to the individual. So here's an example of what I mean by intersubjective. Like, let's say you have a group of some people that say they want blue, and then some people that say they want green, and they can't agree on which path to take forward, right? And they can talk about it all day long, and anyone who's been in a DAO like governance issue knows how difficult that is like everyone's communicating, but there's no decision being made. And that's because it can't be quantified and everyone can't see it in an intersubjective way. So what you have to do is you can actually use all this rich data we have on-chain and off-chain, validated by cryptographic signatures, use them to compute reputation and weight and influence based on their how much impact they've had in the past. And based on their reputation and influence and weight, you can change these however you want. We can blend the individual perspectives into instead of blue or green, we have a nice teal, and it's just a bit teal. It's not really fully teal because the people that wanted the green didn't have as much influence as the other people. So if we just do this and scale it out, we can get some pretty cool stuff. So what does this look like, practically speaking, in terms of how do we actually do this? The most important base layer that we need is a shared open state. Vitalik talked about this. So all this data that we have about people, it's all kind of in different DAOs and databases and all these different places. If you can have one uniform place to hold this data and store it, then we can all start pushing to it. And then what we do after that is we have this structured event stream of everything that happened, things that people did. For example, for the DAOist event, we can write down, Felipe did this, or this person did this person got the food, this person organized this. We just write out facts and state them there. And then we can create other curators, essentially, where the curator's job is to take that raw data feed of what's valuable and curate it to represent the views of a certain community. So we can have curators finding these really valuable things and highlighting them, but that's a difficult job to do. How do you incentivize doing it? So a really good model for this is prediction markets, but I don't like to call it prediction markets because prediction kind of implies gambling, and markets implies speculation on something else. But if you reframe prediction markets into curation games, then curation implies that you as a curator are actually adding value into the system. And it's a game because it's fun, it's kind of dynamic, and you're incentivized to do it because there's a reward if you do it well. So these curators, if they find these contributions or add data into this data set of things that happened, then if other people determine that thing to be valuable and they were the first ones to signal it, they can then get like a share of that value flow because they were before everyone else. So that incentivizes people to find and record all the like really cool stuff that people do that goes unheard. And yeah, so communities can then attribute value based on their own perspective to the same different events, because something that a single community creates that often has value for many people in the ecosystem. And if we have a way for those communities to capture that value, then communities will try for interoperability as much as possible, because the more things you can integrate with, the more communities you can connect with, the more value flows you'll have back to you. So it changes the game theory from like competition to collaboration. And then each community can then distribute tokens according to the backflows of like who made those things happen that were valuable. And individuals can then receive flows of tokens from many different communities on a like continuous basis. So what this is essentially we have a real-time sensor for what people think is valuable, because people can just communicate it and we can record it and we can use cryptography to verify it. And then based on that sensor of what's valuable, we can plug that directly in with like monetary value and just pump value through the system, because we know that it's only going to things that the community agreed are valuable, right? So you eliminate that problem where we have to decide and like, you know, budget this chunk of money for this thing, give it to them, let them run for a few months, see what happened. That doesn't really work well. And especially if you look at these DeFi treasuries, they have billions of dollars, but they're not able to allocate it or, you know, actually get that money out there because they have to kind of trust another group to handle, or they're basically delegating the allocation of that to another group. Right. And for example, the DeFi education fund thing, like they gave $10 million, $20 million. And they don't know what they're going to do with it. But if the DAO treasury has a way to map out, or has a quantifiable way to map out all the value that was created, it can just plug it in and it goes directly to the people that created that value without any intermediaries or people who sit in the middle trying to determine what was valuable and where to allocate money. And I think that's really powerful because it changes the game where right now billionaires, the reason they don't spend their billions on trying to like improve the world is because when they try to do that, the money usually gets misallocated. You know, maybe 1 to 5% actually gets to the end people, but it just goes through other people and they take their cuts, and there's no direct way for people to plug in their value and capital and just put it towards a good cause and know that it's going to get there in a like cryptographically quantifiable way. But once we enable this, once we have this rich data from, you know, POAPs are at all these events, we have all this data, who is at which place, we can add these to our identities, it can all be tracked, and we can grow our reputation over time. So this is all quantifiable data on what's valuable, and it can just be like a fire hose of capital instead of a trickle down capital from, you know, people who have accumulated a lot of capital and are altruistic and want to spend it on good things, but have it misallocated because on its way down it just gets, you know, taken by others. I think like for this whole thing to work, it kind of needs every piece of the tool set to be there. So we need Sybil resistance. We need decentralized identity. We need these like rich data sets, these content graphs, and the graphs curation system is actually very close to how this system can work, where you use that same mechanism where people are responsible for curating data sets and like attributing value to them, and then other people can delegate their like vote to these curators, and the people that get the most vote delegated to them earn the most rewards, because that's a signal for how good your graph was. And you know, we use cryptography for cryptocurrency right now, but we don't use cryptography for crypto data. We use it to keep track of numbers and balances of tokens, but we can actually use it to keep track of statements and logical facts that are backed by, you know, reputation. So if, you know, my whole identity with all my on-chain data, my POAPs, my coordinate, my source cred, everything, if I like sign a message that says like this thing was valuable, that's a like cryptographic attestation with like a proof of reputation that that thing is true, you know, and we can permissionlessly flow value to it without needing to go to any intermediary to like allocate it, just because it's there, that information's there. I think my time's up.